The distant howl of a lone wolf carried on the wind as Clay Porter stared out across the vast Wyoming wilderness, his calloused fingers tracing the outline of a small silver locket dangling from his neck. It was 1879, and the weight of his losses hung heavier than the six-shooter at his hip. Tonight, like every night for the past 3 years, he would talk to a daughter who wasn't there. Clay's weathered boots kicked up dust as he made his way back to his modest ranch house perched on the edge of the frontier. At 32, the lines around his eyes told stories of both laughter and sorrow. His once vibrant spirit had been hollowed by grief when his wife Sarah died in childbirth, leaving him with their newborn daughter Emma. In his desperation and inability to care for an infant alone on the frontier, he'd made a decision that haunted him every waking moment he had given Emma to Sarah's sister and her husband in Boston, believing the child deserved a better life than what a broken cowboy could provide. As the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in brilliant oranges and purples, Clay settled onto the wooden rocking chair on his porch. The evening ritual began, as it always did, with him talking to the stars as if his words might somehow travel across the vast distance to his daughter. "Evening, little one," he whispered, his deep voice softening. "The cattle were ornery today, reminds me of your mama stubborn as the day is long." He chuckled softly, the sound fading into the gathering darkness. "I hope you're sleeping well under those fancy Boston sheets. I wonder if you look more like her every day." Miles away in the small frontier town of Whispering Creek, Madeline Kelly stepped off the stagecoach, her green eyes scanning the dusty main street with a mixture of determination and apprehension. At 28, she had left behind a promising career as a schoolteacher in Chicago to accept a position in this remote corner of Wyoming territory. Her chestnut hair was pinned neatly beneath a practical bonnet, and her traveling dress, though simple, spoke of Eastern refinement. "Miss Kelly." A portly man with a jovial face approached her. "Mayor Townsend at your service. We're mighty pleased to have a proper schoolteacher in Whispering Creek." Madeline smiled politely, though exhaustion from the grueling journey threatened to overwhelm her. "Thank you, Mayor. I'm eager to begin." "The schoolhouse needs some work," he admitted, helping her with her trunk. "But the children are excited, been without proper schooling for nearly a year now." As they walked down the street, Madeline took in the frontier town, a far cry from the bustling streets of Chicago she had left behind. A general store, saloon, small church, and scattered houses made up most of the settlement. In the distance, the majestic mountains stood as silent sentinels. "Your boarding room is above the general store," Mayor Townsend explained. "Mrs. Parker keeps a clean establishment. You'll have your meals with her family." That night, as Madeline unpacked her meager belongings, she paused at a small photograph tucked between the pages of her Bible. The image showed her with a small child, a girl of about 3 years old with bright eyes and a serious expression. "We made it, Emma," she whispered, gently touching the photograph. "Just as I promised." Madeline wasn't just a schoolteacher seeking a new beginning. She was a woman with a mission born from a deathbed promise to her dear friend Rebecca, Sarah's sister. Before succumbing to consumption, Rebecca had begged Madeline to find Clay Porter and reunite him with his daughter Emma, now a quiet, thoughtful child of 5. "He deserves to know his daughter," Rebecca had whispered in her final days, "and she needs her father." Madeline had taken Emma under her wing after both Rebecca and her husband, Thomas, died within months of each other. The little girl rarely spoke, carrying grief too heavy for her young shoulders. Now they had come to Wyoming with dual purposes. Madeline would teach, and somehow she would find Clay Porter. The next morning dawned bright and clear as Clay rode into Whispering Creek for supplies. The small frontier town was unusually lively, with several wagons parked outside the general store. "Morning, Clay," called Walter, the storekeeper, as he entered. "Here for your monthly provisions?" Clay nodded, his tall frame and broad shoulders drawing glances from several women nearby. Despite being one of the most eligible men in the territory, he had shown no interest in remarrying. His heart remained tethered to a past he couldn't reclaim. "Heard we got ourselves a new schoolteacher," Walter continued, gathering Clay's regular items. Pretty little thing from back east. Mayor's hoping she'll civilize some of these wild young-uns. Clay grunted noncommittally. The comings and goings of townsfolk rarely concerned him these days. She's got a little girl with her too, Walter added. Quiet little thing. At this, Clay's head snapped up, an unbidden hope rising that he immediately quashed. There were plenty of widows with children seeking fresh starts in the West. It was foolish to think. The bell above the door tinkled, and Clay turned to see a woman enter, holding the hand of a small child. The woman was lovely in a refined way, her simple dress and practical boots suggesting she had at least some understanding of frontier life. But it was the child who captured Clay's attention completely. The little girl had familiar eyes that reminded him painfully of Sarah. She stared back at him with a solemn expression that seemed too serious for a child so young. "Good morning," the woman greeted Walter warmly. "I'm hoping to purchase some slate boards for the schoolhouse." "Miss Kelly," Walter beamed. "Of course, just got a shipment in." "And this must be your daughter," something flashed across the woman's face, hesitation, perhaps. "This is Emma," she said carefully. "She's in my care." At the name, Clay felt the ground shift beneath his feet. Emma. His Emma would be about this child's age now, but it couldn't be possible. His daughter was in Boston, hundreds of miles away, living with her aunt and uncle in luxury he could never provide. "Clay Porter," Walter said, gesturing toward him. "One of our local ranchers. Clay, this is Miss Madeline Kelly, our new schoolteacher." Clay managed a nod, his throat suddenly dry. "Madam." Madeline studied him with intelligent green eyes that seemed to see more than he was comfortable revealing. "Mr. Porter," she acknowledged. "I've heard your name mentioned. You have one of the larger spreads east of town, I believe." "Nothing special," he muttered, gathering his purchases. "Just me and a few hands keeping the place running." The little girl Emma continued to stare at him, her small fingers clutching Madeline's skirts. There was something in her gaze that unsettled him, something that stirred memories best left buried. "Will you be enrolling in our school, Mr. Porter?" Madeline asked, a curious lilt to her voice. The unexpected question startled a brief laugh from him. "Bit old for schooling, Miss Kelly." "I meant any children in your care," she clarified, though something in her expression suggested she knew the answer already. "No children," he said shortly, tipping his hat. "Good day, madam, miss." He nodded to the little girl, who still hadn't spoken a word. As Clay left the store, he couldn't shake the feeling that something significant had just occurred. The child's eyes followed him, burning into his back as he mounted his horse and rode away. That night, his conversation with the stars felt different. "I saw a little girl today," he told the empty air. "She had eyes like your mama's, Emma. Made me wonder if you've got her eyes, too." He rocked slowly in his chair, the creak of wood punctuating his words. "I wonder if you're happy, if you ever think about the father you never knew." 3 days later, Clay was mending fences on the north side of his property when he spotted a rider approaching. As the figure drew closer, he recognized the neat silhouette of the new schoolteacher, Miss Kelly. She rode with surprising competence for a city woman. "Mr. Porter," she called as she neared, reining in her mount. "I hope I'm not intruding." Clay straightened, pushing his hat back. "Long way from town, Miss Kelly." "I've been visiting the families with school-aged children," she explained, dismounting gracefully. "Mayor Townsend mentioned your ranch was on my route." "Told you I don't have children," he said, returning to his work. "Yes, but you do have 2 ranch hands with families," she countered. "Mr. Davis has a 10-year-old son, and Mr. Rodriguez has twin 8-year-old daughters." Clay paused. She'd done her research. "They're good men, good fathers." "Unlike you?" The question slipped out before Madeline could stop it, hanging in the air between them. Clay's head snapped up, his blue eyes narrowing dangerously. "What did you say?" Madeline swallowed but held her ground. "I apologize for being forward, Mr. Porter. It's just that in my experience, men who talk to the stars at night often have someone they're trying to reach." The blood drained from Clay's face. "You've been watching me." "No," she said quickly. "But Emma and I are staying at the Wilson place while Mrs. Wilson visits her sister. It's only temporary until my quarters above the store are properly prepared. Their property adjoins yours to the south. Last night, Emma couldn't sleep and we walked on the porch." We saw you on your porch talking to someone who wasn't there. Clay's jaw clenched. What I do on my own property is my business, Miss Kelly. Of course, she agreed softly, but Emma was curious. She wanted to know who you were talking to, and what did you tell her? He asked, his voice rough. Madeline hesitated. I told her sometimes people talk to those they've lost. She understood that. She talks to her parents every night before bed. Clay's expression softened slightly. The child is an orphan? Yes, Madeline said carefully. Her mother died when she was born, her father. Her father thought she would have a better life with others who could care for her properly. Clay stilled, his hammer suspended in midair. And did she have a better life? She was loved, Madeline answered truthfully. But circumstances change. Her adoptive parents both passed away within the last year. Clay turned away, driving a nail into the fence post with more force than necessary. Life's cruel that way. It can be, Madeline agreed. But it also offers second chances, Mr. Porter, sometimes where we least expect them. Clay didn't respond, and after a moment, Madeline mounted her horse again. School begins next Monday. Mr. Davis and Mr. Rodriguez are welcome to send their children. Good day, Mr. Porter. As she rode away, Clay watched her retreating figure with a mixture of irritation and curiosity. There was something about Madeline Kelly that unsettled him deeply, as if she knew things about him that he'd never shared with anyone. That evening, when Clay settled onto his porch, he was acutely aware that he might be observed. Yet the nightly ritual was too important to abandon. After a moment's hesitation, he began to speak. Your aunt sent me a letter when you were 2, he said softly to the stars. Said you were talking up a storm. Wonder if you're still chatty. Your mama sure was. He smiled at the memory. She could talk circles around anyone in 3 counties. In the distance, at the edge of the Wilson property, Madeline stood on the porch with Emma beside her. The child's small hand was tucked in hers as they watched the distant figure of Clay Porter. Is that the man from the store? Emma asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Yes, sweetheart, Madeline answered. His name is Mr. Porter. Who is he talking to? Madeline knelt beside the child, choosing her words carefully. I think he's talking to someone he misses very much, someone he loves but can't be with. Emma's solemn eyes studied the distant figure. Like how I talk to Mama and Papa in heaven. Something like that, Madeline said, stroking the child's hair. Not for the first time, she questioned whether she was doing the right thing. Was it fair to disrupt Clay Porter's life, to potentially reopen wounds that had taken years to scab over? Yet looking at Emma's face in the fading light, seeing Sarah's features echoed there, she knew she had to try. Time for bed, little one, she said gently. We have a busy day tomorrow. The following Sunday, Clay attended church in town, something he did irregularly at best. He told himself it had nothing to do with the new schoolteacher or the child who might be in attendance. It was simply time to make an appearance before Pastor Miller sent someone to check on his immortal soul. The small church was nearly full when he arrived, forcing him to take a seat near the front. As the congregation rose to sing the opening hymn, Clay spotted Madeline Kelly and Emma a few rows ahead. The little girl wore a blue dress with a ribbon in her hair, looking painfully small next to the other children. Throughout the service, Clay found his attention wandering to them. The child sat perfectly still, her back straight and her hands folded in her lap, unusual discipline for one so young. Madeline occasionally bent to whisper something in her ear, and once Emma smiled slightly in response. That smile transformed her serious little face, and Clay felt an unexpected pang in his chest. Had his Emma ever smiled like that? Did she laugh and play like other children? The questions he usually reserved for nighttime conversations invaded his thoughts in the middle of Pastor Miller's sermon on forgiveness and redemption. After the service, Clay found himself lingering outside the church rather than making his usual quick escape. He watched as Madeline and Emma greeted various townsfolk, the schoolteacher making a visible effort to memorize names and connections. Beautiful child, remarked Sheriff Thomas, who had appeared at Clay's side. Shame about her circumstances. Clay glanced at the older man. You know about her. Miss Kelly explained when she registered with the town. Child's parents died back east. Miss Kelly was their neighbor and took the girl in rather than seeing her sent to an orphanage. The sheriff shook his head. Good woman, that one. Taking on a child not her own and moving all the way out here for a fresh start. Clay's gaze returned to Emma, who was now being introduced to Mrs. Barton, the town's most notorious gossip. The girl's solemn expression and careful manners struck him again. There was something so familiar about her, yet he couldn't place it. As if sensing his scrutiny, Emma looked up and met his eyes across the churchyard. For a long moment, they stared at each other until Madeline noticed and followed the child's gaze. When she spotted Clay, she said something to Emma, then took the girl's hand and led her directly toward him. Mr. Porter, Madeline greeted him warmly. How nice to see you in town, Clay nodded, suddenly tongue-tied with the child's serious gaze fixed upon him. Emma, Madeline continued, this is Mr. Porter. We met him at the general store, remember? The child nodded but remained silent. She doesn't speak much, Madeline explained quietly, not since her parents passed. I understand that, Clay found himself saying. He crouched down to Emma's level, surprising himself as much as Madeline. Sometimes words don't come easy when your heart hurts. Emma studied him with those unnervingly familiar eyes before giving him a tiny nod of acknowledgement. Would you and Emma care to join me for lunch at the hotel? The invitation came out before Clay had fully formed the thought. They serve a decent Sunday meal. Madeline appeared momentarily taken aback, then smiled. That's very kind of you, Mr. Porter. We'd be delighted, wouldn't we, Emma? The child nodded again, her expression unreadable. As they walked toward the hotel, Clay found himself uncharacteristically nervous. He hadn't shared a meal with anyone other than his ranch hands in years, let alone a refined woman and a child. Yet something compelled him forward, some instinct he couldn't name pulling him toward this solemn little girl and the schoolteacher with knowing eyes. The hotel dining room was busy with the after-church crowd, but they secured a table near the window. Clay pulled out chairs for both Madeline and Emma, an echo of manners from his earlier life. You're very gallant, Mr. Porter, Madeline observed as she arranged her skirts. My mother would haunt me if I forgot my manners, he replied with a small smile. She was particular about such things. And your father? Madeline asked, helping Emma spread a napkin on her lap. A hard man, but fair, Clay said after a moment. Taught me everything I know about ranching. Are they still with us? Clay shook his head. Lost them both to influenza 10 years back. It was their ranch originally. I'm sorry for your loss, Madeline said sincerely. Family is precious. Clay's eyes drifted to Emma, who was staring out the window at a bird perched on the sill. Yes, it is. Their meal arrived roast beef with potatoes and vegetables. Clay watched as Madeline carefully cut Emma's meat into small pieces, noting the natural way she cared for the child despite not being her mother. How are you finding Whispering Creek, Miss Kelly? He asked, attempting normal conversation. It's charming, she replied. The people have been very welcoming, and the landscape is breathtaking, so different from Chicago. Chicago, Clay repeated, big change coming all the way out here. Sometimes change is necessary, she said, her eyes meeting his, for healing. There was something in her tone that suggested she wasn't just speaking of herself and Emma. Before Clay could respond, Emma spoke, her voice so soft he almost missed it. You have a horse. Clay turned to the child, surprised. I do, several in fact. Emma nodded thoughtfully, taking a small bite of potato. I've never ridden a horse. Never. Clay couldn't hide his astonishment. Even city children usually had opportunities for pony rides. Emma's guardians were very protective, Madeline explained. They thought horseback riding too dangerous, Clay frowned slightly. Out here, riding is as necessary as walking. Every child should learn. Perhaps you could teach her, Madeline suggested, and Clay detected a hint of calculation in her seemingly innocent question. He hesitated, then looked at Emma's expectant face. If Miss Kelly approves, you're welcome to come to my ranch sometime. I have a gentle mare that would be perfect for a beginner. For the first time, he saw genuine excitement in the child's eyes. Really? Really, he confirmed, something warming in his chest at her response. That's very generous, Madeline said. Perhaps next Saturday, if you're not too busy. And just like that, Clay found himself with plans something he hadn't had outside of ranch work in years. As they finished their meal, he observed the way Emma carefully ate everything on her plate, the way she thanked the server with perfect manners, and the way her eyes occasionally darted to him with curiosity. Walking them back to the Wilson place after lunch, Clay found himself engaged in easy conversation with Madeline about the upcoming school year while Emma walked slightly ahead, stopping occasionally to examine a flower or interesting rock. "She's a remarkable child," he commented as they watched her kneel to study a butterfly that had landed on a wildflower. "She is," Madeline agreed softly. "She's been through more than any child should have to endure, yet she maintains such strength and dignity." "Children are resilient," Clay said, thinking of his own daughter facing life without her birth parents, "more than we give them credit for. Yes, but they still need guidance, security." Madeline turned to look at him directly. "They need to know they're loved even when circumstances aren't ideal." Again, Clay had the unsettling feeling that her words carried deeper meaning. Before he could question her, Emma returned to their side, holding out the wildflower she had picked. "For you," she said, offering it to Clay. Stunned, he accepted the simple gift, a lump forming in his throat. "Thank you, Emma." She nodded seriously, then took Madeline's hand again as they continued walking. That night, as Clay sat on his porch and began his nightly ritual, he found his thoughts full of the day's events. "I met a little girl today who reminds me of you," he told the stars. "Or at least, who I imagine you to be. She's quiet and thoughtful with eyes that seem to see right through a person." He twirled the wildflower between his fingers. "She gave me a flower, first gift I've received in years." He paused, emotions welling up. "I wish you could give me flowers, Emma. I wish I could teach you to ride and watch you grow up. I made a terrible mistake letting you go. I see that now, but it's too late to undo what's done." In the distance, at the edge of his property, two figures stood in the shadows, a woman and a child, listening to the cowboy's confession to the night sky. "That's who he talks to," Emma whispered, her small voice carrying in the still evening air. "A girl with my name." Madeline knelt beside her, heart pounding. "Yes, sweetheart, he talks to his daughter." Emma's brow furrowed in concentration. "Where is she?" "Far away," Madeline answered carefully. "He had to let her go when she was just a baby because he couldn't take care of her after her mother died." Emma processed this information, her expression serious. "Is he sad?" "Very sad," Madeline confirmed. "He misses her terribly." Emma stared at the distant figure for a long moment. "He has kind eyes," she finally said. "Like in the picture," Madeline's breath caught. The picture, the one Rebecca had given Emma of her birth parents on their wedding day. Emma kept it under her pillow, though she rarely mentioned it. "Yes," Madeline agreed softly, "he does have kind eyes." As promised, the following Saturday found Clay waiting nervously at his ranch. He'd spent the morning preparing grooming Daisy, his gentlest mare, checking the small saddle he'd borrowed from the Rodriguez twins, and even cleaning his rarely used parlor in case they came inside after the riding lesson. His ranch hands had noticed his unusual behavior but wisely kept their comments to themselves. Only Jose Rodriguez had offered a knowing smile when Clay asked to borrow the girl's saddle. "The new teacher's ward, eh?" Jose had said. "Carmen says she's a sweet child, very polite." "Just doing a favor," Clay had muttered, embarrassed at how transparent he apparently was. Now he stood by the corral, watching the road for any sign of visitors. When he finally spotted the approaching buggy, his heart rate quickened unexpectedly. He adjusted his clean shirt and ran a hand through his freshly trimmed hair. Madeline drove the buggy with confidence. Emma seated beside her, practically bouncing with excitement, the most animation he'd seen from the child yet. They pulled up to the hitching post, and Clay stepped forward to help them down. "Welcome to Porter Ranch," he said, lifting Emma from the buggy with careful hands. She felt so small, so fragile in his grasp, and for a moment he was transported back in time, holding a newborn infant with the same care. "Thank you for having us, Mr. Porter," Madeline said, accepting his hand as she descended. "Emma has talked of nothing else all week." The child was already staring at Daisy, who stood patiently in the corral. Is that my horse? She asked, her voice carrying the first hint of childish excitement he'd heard. This is Daisy, Clay confirmed, leading them to the fence. She's the gentlest horse on the ranch, perfect for beginners. Emma approached the fence cautiously. Daisy, sensing a potential new friend, ambled over and extended her nose. The child froze, uncertain. It's okay, Clay encouraged, stepping beside her. She's saying hello, you can pet her nose, it's soft. Emma glanced up at him, seeking reassurance, then tentatively extended her hand. When Daisy's velvety muzzle touched her palm, the girl's face transformed with delight. She likes me, she exclaimed. Of course she does, Clay said, something warm unfurling in his chest at the child's joy. Animals can sense good people. For the next hour, Clay patiently introduced Emma to the basics of horsemanship. He showed her how to approach from the side to avoid startling Daisy, how to offer an apple as a treat, and finally, how to sit in the saddle. Madeline watched from the fence, her expression a mixture of happiness and something deeper Clay couldn't quite identify. When Emma was securely seated on Daisy's back, Clay led the mare slowly around the corral. The child's initial nervousness gave way to confidence, and soon she was sitting straight, her small hands correctly positioned on the reins as Clay had shown her. "Look at me, Miss Kelly," she called, her face flushed with excitement. "You're doing wonderfully, Emma," Madeline called back. A natural horsewoman, Clay couldn't help but smile at the child's enthusiasm. "You're a quick learner," he told her. "Most children take longer to sit so properly in the saddle." Emma beamed at his praise, and once again, Clay was struck by a sense of familiarity that disturbed him. There was something about her smile, the way her nose crinkled slightly at the bridge. After the riding lesson, Clay invited them inside for lemonade and cookies Mrs. Rodriguez had sent over that morning. His house was simple but clean, with practical furniture and few decorations. The most prominent feature was a framed photograph on the mantel, a young woman with laughing eyes and a sweet smile. "Your wife?" Madeline asked gently, noticing Emma's curious gaze fixed on the picture. Clay nodded, a familiar ache in his chest. "Sarah, she passed 5 years ago." "She was pretty," Emma said quietly, studying the photograph. "Yes," Clay agreed, his voice rough. "The prettiest woman in Wyoming territory." Madeline sipped her lemonade, watching the interaction with careful eyes. "Did you have any children, Mr. Porter?" The direct question startled him. Most people in town knew his history but were too polite to mention it. "A daughter," he admitted after a moment. "She lives back east with relatives." "Do you see her often?" Madeline pressed, Clay's expression closed. "No, it's complicated," Emma, sensing the tension, spoke up unexpectedly. "My real papa couldn't keep me either." The simple statement hung in the air, stunning both adults into silence. Clay stared at the child, unable to form words. "Emma," Madeline said carefully, "Mr. Porter might not want to discuss such personal matters," but Clay found his voice. "It's all right. What? What happened with your father, Emma?" The little girl shrugged with the painful simplicity of childhood. "My mama died when I was born. Papa couldn't take care of a baby by himself. Aunt Rebecca said he was too sad and the ranch was no place for a baby without a mama." Clay's blood ran cold. Ranch, no place for a baby, Aunt Rebecca. The room seemed to tilt around him as impossible connections began forming in his mind. "Emma," he said hoarsely, "what was your mama's name?" "Sarah," the child answered, and Clay's world shattered. He turned to Madeline, who was watching him with tears in her eyes. "You knew," he whispered. "All this time you knew." "Yes," she admitted softly. "Rebecca was my dearest friend. Before she died, she asked me to find you to reunite you with Emma. She and Thomas both succumbed to consumption within months of each other. There was no one else to care for her." Clay's legs gave way, and he sank onto the nearest chair, his eyes never leaving the child his child. Emma looked back at him with Sarah's eyes, confusion evident in her expression. "Miss Kelly," she questioned uncertainly. "Is something wrong?" Madeline knelt beside her. "Emma, remember how I told you we came to Wyoming partly because I had a promise to keep, and how sometimes life gives second chances?" The child nodded solemnly. "Mr. Porter is your father, Emma." "Your birth father?" Emma's eyes widened, darting between the adults. My papa, the one in my picture." Yes, sweetheart, Madeline confirmed. The very same. Clay couldn't speak, couldn't move as he absorbed this impossible truth. His daughter, his Emma, was here in his home, looking at him with Sarah's eyes. Not in Boston with wealthy relatives, but here in Wyoming with a schoolteacher who had traveled across the country to fulfill a promise. "Why didn't you tell me immediately?" he finally managed, looking at Madeline. "I needed to be sure," she explained gently. "Sure of your character, sure that reuniting you would be best for Emma. She's been through so much loss already. I couldn't risk more trauma if you weren't ready to be her father." Clay turned back to Emma, who was watching him with an unreadable expression. "Emma," he said, his voice breaking, "I don't know what to say. I've thought about you every day since you were born, talked to you every night, hoping somehow you could hear me." "The man who talks to stars," Emma said quietly. "You were talking to me," Clay nodded, tears flowing freely now. "I thought I was doing what was best for you. Your mama died and I was broken. I thought you deserved better than a grieving cowboy who didn't know the first thing about raising a little girl." Emma considered this with remarkable composure for a 5-year-old. Then, with the directness only children possess, she asked, "Do you want me now?" The question pierced Clay's heart like a physical blow. "More than anything in this world," he answered truthfully. "But only if you want to be here. This is your choice too, Emma." The child slid from her chair and approached him cautiously. She studied his face with an intensity that reminded him painfully of Sarah. Then, reaching into the pocket of her pinafore, she withdrew a folded, worn photograph. "This is you," she said, showing him the wedding portrait Rebecca had given her. "With my mama." Clay took the photograph with trembling hands, he and Sarah on their wedding day, young and so full of hope for the future. "Yes," he confirmed, "that's us." Emma nodded decisively. "I look like her, but I have your smile. Aunt Rebecca always said so." Without warning, she stepped forward and placed her small hand on his cheek, wiping away a tear with her thumb. The gesture was so tender, so unexpected, that Clay had to stifle a sob. "Don't cry, Papa," she said, the words sounding both foreign and perfectly natural on her lips. The dam broke. Clay gathered his daughter in his arms for the first time since she was a newborn, holding her as if she might disappear. Emma allowed the embrace, her small arms wrapping around his neck with surprising strength. Madeline watched the reunion with tears streaming down her face. This was what Rebecca had hoped for: father and daughter reunited, healing beginning for both wounded souls. "I should give you two some time alone," she said softly, rising to leave. "Please stay," Clay said quickly, looking up without releasing Emma. "We both owe you more than we can ever repay." "It was the right thing to do," Madeline replied simply. The next few hours passed in a blur of emotions as Clay and Emma began the tentative process of getting to know each other. The child sat beside him on the sofa, asking questions about the ranch, about the animals, and finally about her mother. "She was kind," Clay told her, his voice soft with remembrance, "and brave, so brave. She could outride most men in the county and had a laugh that made everyone around her smile. But the best thing about her was her heart. She loved completely, without reservation." "Like you talk to me every night," Emma observed. "That's loving completely." Clay nodded, amazed at the child's perception. "Yes, exactly like that." As the afternoon waned, practical matters needed addressing. Clay looked to Madeline uncertainly. "What happens now?" he asked. "Legally, I mean. I signed papers giving up my rights." "Rebecca kept copies of everything," Madeline explained, "including a letter from you stating that if anything happened to them, Emma should be returned to your care. It was never officially revoked. Judge Williams in town can help formalize things, but essentially, Emma is already legally yours." The knowledge both terrified and elated him. "I don't know the first thing about raising a little girl," he admitted. "You'll learn," Madeline assured him, "and I'll help if you'll allow it." Their eyes met over Emma's head, and something unspoken passed between them: gratitude, respect, and perhaps the faintest glimmer of something more. "We should head back," Madeline said finally. "It's getting late and Emma needs her dinner and rest." Clay felt a surge of panic at the thought of them leaving. "You'll come back tomorrow, of course," Madeline promised. "This is just the beginning. Before they left, Emma hugged him again, more confidently this time. "Good night, Papa," she whispered. "Will you still talk to the stars tonight?" "I will," Clay promised, his voice thick with emotion. "But now I know you can hear me." That night, Clay sat on his porch as usual, but everything had changed. The stars seemed brighter, the air sweeter, the weight on his shoulders impossibly lighter. "I found you," he told the night sky. "Or rather, you found me. I still can't believe it, Emma. You're here in Wyoming, and you're even more perfect than I imagined. I'm terrified of making mistakes, of not being the father you deserve. But I promise you this, I will never let you go again." At the Wilson place, Madeline tucked Emma into bed, the child's eyes heavy with the day's excitement and emotions. "Is he really my papa?" Emma asked sleepily. "It's not a dream. He's really your papa," Madeline confirmed, smoothing the child's hair, "and he loves you very much." "I think I love him too," Emma murmured as she drifted toward sleep. "He has kind eyes." Madeline sat beside the bed long after Emma fell asleep, wondering at the strange path life had taken her on. She had come to Wyoming to fulfill a promise to her dying friend, never expecting to find herself drawn to the quiet cowboy with sad eyes who talked to the stars. The next morning, Clay was at their door before breakfast, unable to stay away. Mrs. Wilson, now returned from visiting her sister and briefed on the situation, welcomed him warmly. "That child needs her father," the older woman declared. "Providence works in mysterious ways, Mr. Porter." Emma came running when she heard his voice, her usual reserve temporarily forgotten in her excitement. "Papa, you came," the word still sent a shock through Clay's system. Papa. He was a father not just in biology or in his nightly conversations with the stars, but in reality, with a living, breathing child who needed him. "I thought perhaps you might like to see the new foal that was born yesterday," he suggested after greeting Madeline with shy politeness. Emma's eyes widened. "A baby horse, can we go now? Please, Miss Kelly," Madeline laughed at her enthusiasm. "After breakfast, and only if Mr. Porter joins us." The invitation was impossible to refuse. As they ate Mrs. Wilson's excellent pancakes, they discussed practical arrangements. Emma would continue living with Madeline until Clay could prepare his home properly for a child. "The spare bedroom needs furnishing," he explained, "and I should probably hire a housekeeper. The place isn't fit for a young lady." "I can help with the bedroom," Madeline offered. "I have some experience making spaces comfortable for children." "And I could visit every day?" Emma asked hopefully. "To see Daisy and the foal, every day," Clay promised. "And when you're ready, you can come live with me permanently, but only when you're ready, Emma. I won't rush you." The child considered this seriously. "I would miss Miss Kelly," she admitted. "Miss Kelly will still be your teacher," Clay assured her, "and she's welcome at the ranch anytime." Madeline felt her cheeks warm at his words and the way his eyes lingered on hers. "That's very generous." "It's selfish, actually," Clay admitted with unexpected candor. "I'm going to need all the help I can get." The next 2 weeks established a pattern. Clay would finish his essential ranch work early, then come to town to spend time with Emma. They rode together daily, her confidence on horseback growing remarkably fast. He attended her first day of school, watching proudly as she took her seat among the other children of Whispering Creek. Madeline observed the blossoming relationship with joy and occasional twinges of something else. She had grown deeply fond of Emma during their months together and found herself increasingly drawn to Clay's quiet strength and gentle ways with his daughter. But her role was becoming less clear as father and child bonded. "You've grown quiet," Clay observed one evening as they watched Emma feeding carrots to Daisy. They had developed a comfortable companionship during these daily visits, often sitting side by side while Emma explored the ranch under their watchful eyes. "Just thinking," Madeline replied. "Emma is thriving with you. She smiles more, talks more. The change in just 2 weeks is remarkable." "Because of you," Clay said seriously. "What you did bringing her back to me, I can never repay that debt, Madeline." It was the first time he had used her given name, and the sound of it in his deep voice sent an unexpected shiver through her. "There's no debt," she assured him. "Seeing her happy is payment enough." Clay studied her profile in the fading light. What happens when school ends for the summer? Will you go back east? The question startled her. I haven't thought that far ahead. My contract with the town is for 1 year, renewable if both parties are satisfied. And are you satisfied with life in Whispering Creek? Madeline met his gaze. More than I expected to be. Something shifted between them in that moment, a recognition of feelings neither had anticipated when this journey began. Before Clay could respond, Emma came running back to them. Papa, Miss Kelly. Daisy let me brush her mane all by myself. Excellent work, Clay praised, lifting her onto his lap. You're becoming quite the horsewoman. Emma beamed with pride, then grew suddenly serious. Papa, when can I come live with you? For real? Clay glanced at Madeline, who nodded encouragingly. Your room is almost ready, he told Emma. Mrs. Rodriguez has been helping me get everything just right. I thought perhaps this weekend, if you feel ready. Emma considered this momentous decision with appropriate gravity. Will Miss Kelly still visit us? Every day if she wishes, Clay assured her, his eyes meeting Madeline's over the child's head. Then yes, Emma decided, this weekend. That Saturday, Clay arrived at the Wilson place with his wagon to collect Emma and her belongings. The child was a bundle of nervous excitement, alternating between jubilation and anxiety as Madeline helped her pack her few possessions. What if I can't sleep? Emma whispered as they folded her nightgown. What if I get scared? Your papa will be right down the hall, Madeline assured her. And remember, you can always talk to him about anything. He's waited so long to have you home. Emma nodded, comforted by this reminder. When everything was loaded in the wagon, she hugged Mrs. Wilson tightly, thanking her for her kindness. Then came the hardest goodbye. Emma threw her arms around Madeline's neck, clinging tightly. I wish you could come live with us too, she whispered. Madeline swallowed the lump in her throat. I'll see you at school on Monday and I'll visit often. This isn't goodbye, sweet girl. Clay, witnessing the exchange, stepped forward. Miss Kelly is welcome for dinner tonight, he offered, to help you settle in, if she's available, of course. Madeline accepted gratefully, promising to ride out after completing her school preparations. As she watched them drive away, Emma waving from beside her father, Madeline felt a complex mixture of emotions: joy for their reunion, pride in her part in it, and a wistful longing she hadn't anticipated. That evening, she arrived at Porter Ranch to find the house transformed. Clay had clearly gone to considerable effort. The porch was swept, fresh curtains hung in the windows, and the scent of cooking food wafted from the open door. Emma greeted her with excitement, insisting on showing her the newly furnished bedroom first. The formerly sparse room now held a child-sized bed with a colorful quilt, a small dresser, a bookshelf with several children's books, and even a rocking horse in the corner. Papa got me a wooden horse for when it's too cold to ride Daisy, Emma explained proudly. And look, he found this. She pulled Madeline to the bedside table where a small silver frame held the wedding portrait of Clay and Sarah. He said, this way Mama can watch over me while I sleep, Emma said solemnly. Madeline blinked back tears. That was very thoughtful of him. Dinner's ready, Clay called from the doorway, watching them with a soft expression. Nothing fancy, I'm afraid. Mrs. Rodriguez helped with the stew. The meal was indeed simple but delicious. Emma chattered happily throughout, detailing all the plans she and Clay had made for her life on the ranch, riding lessons every morning, helping to collect eggs from the chickens, learning to garden in the small plot behind the house. After dinner, as the evening ritual of Emma's bedtime approached, Madeline rose to leave. I should head back to town before it gets too dark. Stay, Emma pleaded. Please, just to hear Papa talk to the stars. Madeline glanced at Clay, uncertain. This nightly ritual seemed deeply personal. I'd like you to stay as well, he said quietly, if you're willing. When Emma was bathed and dressed in her nightgown, Clay carried her to the porch where 3 chairs now stood: his rocking chair, a smaller one for Emma, and a comfortable armchair for Madeline. The night was clear, the stars brilliant in the vast Wyoming sky. Ready for our talk? Clay asked Emma as he settled her in her chair with a blanket tucked around her. The child nodded solemnly. But it's different now, I can answer you. Clay smiled, his eyes suspiciously bright in the lantern light. Yes, you can, that's the miracle of it. As the moon rose higher, Clay began the familiar ritual, telling the stars about his day, about his hopes and fears for raising his daughter properly. But now, instead of his words disappearing into the empty night, Emma's small voice responded, offering her own thoughts and reassurances. Madeline watched in silent wonder as father and daughter connected, healing old wounds with each exchange. The scene before her was more beautiful than anything she could have imagined when she'd set out from Chicago with a solemn child and a deathbed promise. As Emma's responses grew sleepier, Clay turned to a story about Sarah, how she had once rescued a nest of rabbits from a field before the harvest, raising the tiny creatures by hand until they were strong enough to return to the wild. She had the gentlest touch, he remembered softly. Just like you, Emma. There was no response. The child had fallen asleep, her head tilted against the chair back, face peaceful in slumber. I should take her in, Clay whispered, carefully lifting his daughter. Madeline followed them inside, turning down the covers as Clay laid Emma in her new bed. Together they tucked her in, a domestic moment that felt surprisingly natural. Back on the porch, they sat in comfortable silence, the night sounds of the ranch creating a peaceful backdrop. Thank you, Clay finally said, his voice rough with emotion, for bringing her back to me, for giving me a second chance I don't deserve. You deserve happiness, Clay, Madeline replied gently. Both of you do. He turned to her, his expression serious in the moonlight. And what about you? What do you deserve? The question hung between them, weighted with unspoken possibilities. Madeline had come to Wyoming with a single purpose: to reunite father and daughter. She hadn't planned for what would come after, hadn't expected to find herself increasingly drawn to the quiet cowboy who spoke to stars. I'm content knowing I fulfilled my promise to Rebecca, she said carefully. Just content, Clay asked, moving to sit beside her. Is that enough? Madeline met his gaze steadily. What are you asking, Clay? I'm asking if you might consider staying, not just as Emma's teacher, not just as our friend. He took a deep breath. I know it's too soon, we've only known each other a short while. But I find myself thinking of you when you're not here, missing your presence in our home. Madeline's heart quickened. Emma needs stability right now, she's adjusting to so many changes already. Emma adores you, Clay countered. She asked me just today if you could be her new mama someday. The admission startled Madeline. She did, Clay nodded, a small smile touching his lips. She's a perceptive child. Notices things adults think they're hiding. Like what? Like how my eyes follow you when you're teaching her to read, like how you blush when our hands accidentally touch. His voice grew softer, like how right it feels when the three of us are together. Madeline couldn't deny the truth in his words. From their first meeting, something had drawn her to Clay Porter beyond her promise to Rebecca. Something that had grown stronger with each day spent in his and Emma's company. I didn't come here looking for this, she admitted. It wasn't part of my plan. The best things rarely are, Clay said, cautiously taking her hand. I'm not asking for promises, just possibilities. Madeline looked at their joined hands, then up at the stars Clay had conversed with for so long. I think I'd like to explore those possibilities, she said softly. Slowly, Clay's smile was worth any uncertainty she might feel. Slowly, he agreed, we have time. Over the coming weeks, a new pattern emerged. Madeline taught school during the day, then rode to Porter Ranch in the afternoons. Sometimes she stayed for dinner. Sometimes she joined Clay and Emma for the nightly star-talking ritual. On Sundays, they attended church together, raising eyebrows and starting whispers throughout Whispering Creek. Folks are talking, Sheriff Thomas commented to Clay one day as they stood outside the general store, saying it's mighty convenient how that schoolteacher brought you a ready-made family. Clay's jaw tightened. People should mind their own business. Just passing along what's being said, the sheriff replied mildly. Personally, I think it's the hand of Providence. That child is the spitting image of Sarah, and she looks at you like you hung the moon. Blood tells. As spring bloomed across the Wyoming landscape, so too did the tentative relationship between Clay and Madeline. Their first kiss came on a warm evening in April, after Emma had been tucked into bed. They stood on the porch where Clay had spoken his heart to the stars for so many lonely years, now finding that his words had a new audience in the woman before him. "I never thought I'd feel this way again," he confessed, his hand gently cupping her cheek. "After Sarah, I believed that part of me was gone forever." "The heart has remarkable capacity for healing," Madeline replied, leaning into his touch. "For second chances." When their lips finally met, it felt like coming home, a sensation neither had expected to find again. The kiss was gentle, unhurried, full of promise and possibility. Unknown to them, a small figure watched from the bedroom window, a smile spreading across her serious little face before she crept back to bed, satisfied with the world's rightness. As summer approached, bringing the end of the school year, the question of Madeline's future became more pressing. Her contract with the town would end in June, requiring a decision about renewal. "The school board has offered me another year," she told Clay one evening as they sat on the porch, watching Emma chase fireflies in the yard. With a small increase in salary, Clay's heart constricted at the thought that she might be considering other options. "And what did you tell them?" "That I needed to consult with my family first," she replied, her eyes meeting his meaningfully. The word family hung between them, full of implications neither had quite articulated yet. "Are we that?" Clay asked quietly. "A family." Madeline took his hand, her touch now familiar and essential. "I believe we are, or at least we're becoming one." That night, after Emma was asleep, Clay reached into his pocket and withdrew a small velvet box worn around the edges from being carried for weeks while he gathered his courage. "This was my mother's," he explained, opening it to reveal a modest diamond ring. Nothing fancy, but it symbolized a love that lasted 40 years, through every hardship the frontier could throw at them. Madeline's breath caught as she realized what was happening. "I'm not a man of flowery words," Clay continued, his voice steady despite his racing heart. "But I know what I feel. I love you, Madeline Kelly. You brought my daughter back to me when I thought I'd lost her forever. You've brought laughter and learning and light back into both our lives. Would you consider adding one more miracle and becoming my wife?" Tears shimmered in Madeline's eyes as she looked from the ring to the man offering it, this quiet, honorable cowboy who had captured her heart so unexpectedly. "Yes," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "Yes, I would be honored to marry you, Clay Porter." As he slipped the ring onto her finger, sealing their promise with a kiss, neither noticed the small face peeking around the corner, nor the whispered, "Finally." That followed before Emma tiptoed back to her room, her greatest wish fulfilled. The wedding took place in late June, a simple ceremony in the Whispering Creek Church with the entire town in attendance. Emma served as flower girl, solemn and precise in her duties until the final pronouncement when she broke protocol to rush forward and embrace both her father and new mother. "We're really a family now," she declared to the laughing congregation, "just like in the stories." That night, as stars blanketed the Wyoming sky, the three of them sat on the Porter Ranch porch together. Clay's arm around his wife, Emma nestled between them, the family connection now official in the eyes of the law, what had been true in their hearts for months. "You still need to talk to the stars, Papa?" Emma asked curiously. "Now that you have us," Clay considered the question thoughtfully. "I think I do," he decided. "But for different reasons now, not out of loneliness or regret, but out of gratitude." "Gratitude for what?" Emma persisted. Clay's eyes met Madeline's over their daughter's head, love flowing between them as naturally as the evening breeze. "For second chances. For prayers answered in unexpected ways. For finding that, even after the deepest loss, happiness is still possible." Emma nodded sagely, accepting this adult wisdom. "And for finding me," she added with the directness of childhood. "Especially for finding you," Clay agreed, dropping a kiss on her head. As Emma's eyelids grew heavy, Madeline lifted the drowsy child. "Time for bed, sweetheart. Can I say goodnight to Mama Sarah first?" Emma asked, their nightly ritual of acknowledging the woman who had given her life. Together, they looked to the brightest star in the sky, the one Emma had decided belonged to her birth mother. "Good night, Mama," the child whispered. I have two parents who love me now just like you wanted." After tucking Emma into bed, Clay and Madeline returned to the porch, settling into the comfortable familiarity they had built over the months. His arm around her shoulders, her head resting against him, they watched the night sky in peaceful silence. "I never imagined this," Clay finally said, his voice low with wonder. "After Sarah died, after I sent Emma away, I thought my life would always be empty. That talking to stars was the closest I'd ever come to being a father again." Madeline looked up at him, love evident in her expression. "And now," Clay smiled, the happiness reaching his eyes in a way that had once seemed impossible. "Now I understand what Emma told me that first night we really talked. Remember?" Madeline nodded, recalling the moment that had changed everything when Emma had first called him Papa and told him not to cry. She whispered, "You're still a father," Clay recalled, his voice thick with emotion. "Even when she wasn't with me, even when I thought I'd lost her forever, I was still her father. I just needed to find my way back to her." "Or for her to find her way back to you," Madeline added softly. Clay kissed his wife tenderly, with a little help from an angel disguised as a schoolteacher. Under the vast Wyoming sky, where once a lonely cowboy had talked to his lost child each night, a family now sat together, proof that even the deepest wounds could heal, that love could find its way home across any distance, and that second chances sometimes came in the most unexpected forms. As summer faded into fall and fall gave way to winter, the Porter Ranch thrived under the care of a family made whole not by blood alone, but by choice and love and the unbreakable connection between a father and the daughter he had found again beneath the stars.